Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about altitude diving and physiology. So a few weeks ago, I decided to go and visit some friends that live in the mountains. It's about, 6,000 feet, 1,800 meters. And I went for a run. And I'm running along, and about 10 minutes later, I was like, I was having a hard time breathing. Can anybody tell me why?
Thinner air?
Thinner air, exactly. At about 6,000 feet, 1,800 meters, the air is thinner. So I'm having to work harder to actually get all of that oxygen in, right? It just so happens that this is the same thing in scuba diving and when we're diving at altitude. So today we're going to be looking at hypoxia and hypothermia. We want to cover this because on Monday when we do our altitude dives, we want to make sure that though unlikely, if we get into these situations, we'll be able to fix it, right? So go ahead and take some notes, ask some questions, do what you need to do, follow along, all right? So by the end of this section, we should be able to identify the two possible detrimental physiological conditions from altitude diving, aside from decompression sickness, of course, and explain their causes and how to avoid them. Now, you'll want to know this and be able to explain it because, should this occur, at least you're prepared, right? So let's take a look. As we ascend, the pressure and the density of the air is less, right? So the more we're working, the harder it is to get all the oxygen, right? It's the same percentage of oxygen that's in the air, but because it's at a higher elevation, it's harder to breathe. So what that means is that when we're at Lake Sunflower this Monday, we're going to be at 2,000 meters, about 6,000 feet. So we're going to have to actually really think about overexertion, right? When we're getting our gear, when we're getting in and out of the water, maybe at the surface swims. So, Arnie, when you put your gear together and you go to the dive site, what do you do?
Take it all in one trip.
Oh, take it all in one trip. You can do the same thing this weekend? No, that's what I thought. So let's take a look at this. Now, underwater, hypoxia is not a problem. Can anybody tell me why?
Pressure?
Pressure, exactly. We descend a few feet, meters, and suddenly we can breathe just fine. Now, if for some reason we are overexerted, we find that we're struggling hard, or maybe just the exit or the entry has been difficult, and we get to the surface and we feel like we're out of breath, what do you think we need to do? I'll give you a hint. It's going to be the same thing that we do at sea level.
Stop and rest?
Stop and rest. See, it's not rocket science. We just do what we normally do. Inflate our BC at the surface, rest, chill, hang out, and then go at maybe a little bit of a slower pace, right? That's all we need to do. So after a few weeks at altitude, our body actually acclimates and we can deal with it. We don't get hypoxic. However, we're not going to have a few weeks. We're only going to have a day. So I've got another way that'll help us out. Enriched air. If we use enriched air, there will be a higher oxygen concentration in the gas that we breathe. And if we breathe it at the surface, right, then that will actually be able to offset some of that thinning air that we're breathing. Now you've got to be able to allow for a little bit more gas, right? We're going to be breathing a little bit more gas. But the good news is I actually have a class on Thursday and Friday that we can do the enriched air course. That way on Monday, we can dive altitude on enriched air. Nice, huh? So now let's talk about hypothermia. Now, you guys all learned in the open water course that due to a lack of body heat, you can go into hypothermia, right? And that's when all of the heat is being basically taken out of the body. We lose body heat faster in the water as well. And we're going to lose body heat even faster when we're at altitude as opposed to when we're at sea level, because it's going to be a whole lot colder up there. The air temperature is going to be colder. So we're going to need to know the signs and symptoms of hypothermia. So let's take a look. Now, do these guys look hypothermic? No, they don't. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But shivering, when you get really, really cold, and the body just starts to break down a little bit. Numbness, right? Especially in our extremities. blueness, especially around the mouth, places that are exposed to water. People talk funny too, right? Because their lips are numb, right? Now, what do we do to avoid getting hypothermic? Obviously, protective gear, right? Gloves, right? We may even want to just jiggle our hands. After the dive, we want to get out of the water. We want to remove all of our wet gear. We want to dry off, right? Because if we don't, that's going to continue to suck the cold or suck the heat out of our body, and we're going to continue to shiver. Now, if we're shivering underwater, if we're really getting to that point, we need to abort the dive and just go ahead and get out, take everything off, dry off, right? Now, these guys don't look like they're hypothermic, do they? No. That's because they're wearing a dry suit, which I highly recommend. Now, a dry suit keeps you completely insulated with a layer of gas. And the colder it is, the more underwear and garments you can put on underneath to keep you warm. And then this little button, you have a little bit of an air puff, and you warm up, right? Not because of the air, but because you're actually making more space between you and the water that is what is actually sucking all that warmth away from you. So for instance, the week after next, we actually have a store fish count at Santiago Isle, and we'd love to have you join us. Now, typically, I can get about 2 dives in about 30 minutes each if I'm diving wet. But if I dive dry, I can get about 3 dives in about 45 minutes each. So you see that comfort level just totally changes. Regardless of the fact, any type of severe hypothermia or just that onset, you want to make sure you get the diver out or get out yourself, right? If you're having a little trouble yourself, go to your buddy and say, help me, let's go. Get out. And for really severe onset hypothermia, you're going to contact EMS. And if the diver goes into shock, you're even going to be doing CPR. You're going to be doing your basic EFR stuff as well, all right? So now we have talked about, in altitude and physiology, hypoxia and hyperthermia, the 2 possible detrimental physiological conditions from altitude diving, aside from decompression sickness, and of course, explain their causes and how to make sure that we actually don't get into those situations in the first place, right? Enriched air. Can anybody tell me how this relates to our topic today?
I can help you prevent hypoxia.
Yes, absolutely. And if we get a little out of breath at the surface,
We should stop and rest.
stop and rest. Excellent. Now, don't forget, if you see that your dive buddy is shivering uncontrollably or has those signs of hypothermia that now you can actually see, make sure you get them out of the water, get them dry, remove the wetsuit, and check them, right? So, before we go though, you got to remember, we are miles away from the nearest dive shop when we go to our dive site. So you want to prep your PADI checklist from your PADI app. Everybody has the PADI app on their phone? Mm-hmm. Great. So you want to make your checklist, make sure you check for your gloves, your hoodie, towel, all those things you're going to need. All right? Let's go diving.